Cecilia.
Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome back to Take Charge of Your Health and to another program, another Sunday morning health program. We are excited to welcome you all on Take Charge of Your Health. At our last presentation, we were discussing the healing benefits of the sun and how SunCure can be used for TB, for example, but other health conditions as well. So we will upload the last presentation that we have shortly, today or tomorrow, and the link will be in the description box of this presentation, so look out for that. Today again we have Brother John EverBlest sharing more about the amazing benefits of the sunshine, and the presentation Brother John has titled Cancer and God's Healing Sunshine. So we are looking forward to that, how to use sunshine and the SunCure wisely. Also reminding everyone we will have a Q&A segment and we can address some questions at the end of the presentation. So if you are on Zoom, write them down in the chat section. If you are on YouTube, again, the live chat section will be available for you to write down your questions and we will address them. So Brother John, welcome back. Thank you for being here with us today again, sharing more about the sun and the amazing benefits we can reap from it.
Great. Well, thank you for asking here. Well, shall I start? Or you got more?
Sure. No?
Yes.
Please start, yeah.
Okay. Well, why don't we start with prayer? Father God, we thank you for your mercies to us and for the amazing provisions that you have made for us in nature. We ask for the Spirit of Jesus to be within us, to grasp what's being said, to make connections that we haven't yet, including me, sir. So thank you for your blessings. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, well, let me share screen and set my stuff up and I'll start. This time I won't be showing my face on it because this particular presentation, I didn't get a chance to manipulate every single one of my slides so a picture can be in the corner. So otherwise block the words. So today it's just that off. Let me stop video and share screen. Here we go. Whoop. I have a thing here that says host disabled participant screen sharing. That would be you, Sosie.
Okay, so how do I do that? Do I have to give you permission to share your screen?
Apparently, I don't know how to do it because I've never done that. Does your hubby know? Let me see.
Last time, I believe I didn't give you permission, but this time I have to check, I guess.
Let's see if I can find it too. I've only hosted once, but just with one other person. So
Can you try again, Brother John?
All right. Hey, there it is. Okay.
Okay.
Very good. Okay, and I've got a video clip in this presentation. So I'm sharing computer sound. Here it goes. Sharing. Okay, let me set this up. And we start from here. Slideshow. Beginning. Flip this around. Okay. Let me move this. One more thing, couple more things. Hide floating. Okay, I am ready. Cancer and God's healing sunlight. I'm going to take a deep breath here. The medical science, by the way, welcome to all of you. I wish I could see your faces. Hi, I am John EverBlest. Yes, I am here in nowhere, Nebraska, in the United States of America. All right, the medical science that claims that God's sunlight causes sunburn. Yes, I said that. That causes sunburn, glaucoma, premature aging, cancer, and death is so compelling, so voluminous, so well established that it cannot possibly be questioned, right? But God's word commands us to question every spirit. So we did, and it changed everything. This is the story of what was discovered and what it means for us, and it's quite surprising. All right, let's start at the very beginning. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light that it was good. To demonstrate how good it was, God placed Adam and Eve in a garden in the sunlight all day, every day naked. I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. He uses light to represent himself, his character, his truth, his healing. The classic example of this is the Son of Righteousness shall arise with healing in his wings. Excuse me. We are reminded that when Adam and Eve fell, God cursed the earth, not the sun. The last curse on the earth was the flood. Now, because of those curses and sinful man's ever-increasing destruction of this earth, our climate is subject to wide fluctuations between hot and cold. But sunlight still retains its healing properties. It's the earth that has gone wacky, not sunlight. The backhanded evidence of that is that sunlight is still relentlessly demonized by Satan's merchants of pharmakeia. The demonization of God's sunlight is an ongoing attack that continually accuses our God of lying when he pronounced sunlight good. So that's particularly painful, by the way, when you hear an Adventist say that sunlight causes cancer. Yet we know that God cannot lie, and that his spoken word is inherent with the power of creation, which means if God speaks that sunlight is good, then it is impossible for it to be otherwise. Believe not every spirit, but try the spirits, whether they are of God. We need to obey this command and test the medical spirits that call God a liar when he pronounced sunlight good. And we may justifiably say, especially those medical spirits, because we have allowed them to hold our health and our very lives in their hands. And that is something we should not do anymore. And we all know why, especially Australians. We are called to release men from those deceptions that keep them clothed in darkness and living in fear. So, we're now going to address the 8 most common deceptions targeting God's sunlight. There are more. We just have room for 8 in an hour. Here we go. Myth number 1. We are told that our God's sunlight is carcinogenic and is causing an epidemic of cancer. Seriously? Do you hear those words? Sunlight is carcinogenic. That's just madness. From a biblical standpoint, this is exceedingly easy to refute for all of us. The word of God pronounced sunlight good. If they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. See? Easy. Done. That's all we need. We can go home. But we shall continue on, not to convince ourselves, because we just did that, but to publicly vindicate God when he said sunlight good. Okay, here we go. Since the beginning of human history, people have lived and worked outdoors during the light of day, absorbing light energy from the sky. An average of 10 hours outdoors each day. 70 hours weekly was common. Wow. Since the Industrial Revolution, most Americans work indoors with very little healthy light. Between 1840 and the year 2000, the percentage of the American workforce in agriculture went from 70% to 2%. So if it's true that sunlight is causing an epidemic of cancer, if it's true, then we would expect that this move to indoor work away from sunlight would have had the exact opposite reaction. No cancer at all, right? But look at that graph. It didn't. Cancer increased exponentially, as we will see in the next slide. And here's that graph from 1935 to 2000. Melanoma increase versus sunlight. In the US, as sun exposure has decreased by about 90% since 1935, melanoma incidence has increased by 3,000%, the exact opposite of what we've been told. And we know that is a theme in the medical world, the exact opposite of what we've been told. Now, we tell a story here. This African tribe lived in the sunlight all day, every day, naked, their entire lives, just like Adam and Eve. Would you expect them to have fabulous vitality or be filled with cancer? One of these things is true. Now, I was giving this very presentation a while back in an in-person presentation, my own church, by the way, and I asked the audience this question. It just seemed to paralyze them. They did not want to publicly get it wrong, so no one answered. But why was this a hard question? It was a simple matter of what does the Bible say? And I had just told them what the Bible said. God pronounced sunlight good. All right, here's the story. From the Battle Creek Sanitarium News Bulletin, November 1, 1929. Some of the unclothed tribes of Central Africa who live on a diet similar to that of a gorilla, that's a vegetarian diet, and with their naked bodies bathed in the glowing rays of a tropical sun, are free from parasitic diseases and are possessed of a resistance so high that cancer, one of the scourges of all civilized lands, is unknown. And such a thing as appendicitis was never heard of. Their dark skins have a luster and silken feel that no cosmetic could improve. And the tide of life runs so high in their lithe bodies that there is no end to their endurances. That's another theme that I've got running throughout my presentations. The men run with government dispatches 60 miles a day, day after day, for hundreds of miles. So the answer is fabulous vitality. Both Native American and Canadian Indians, also scantily clad, had the same kind of fabulous vitality before Western influence dominated. So I'm going to ask you folks there in Australia at the end of this presentation, did it work for their Aborigines? So keep that in mind. I want to hear the results if you know. Now, this African tribe proved that sunlight does not cause cancer. So what do you think would happen were we to take one of these African tribes whose members who have lived all of their lives in the sunlight all day, every day naked, but filtered the sunlight on just 2 square inches on the body, the sunlight that enters their eyes. You notice I said filter the sunlight, not block the sunlight, but filter it. Filter it means to distort that light. Actually, it's better to block the sunlight than filter the sunlight, which we'll see. Which is more likely of that group? Number one, that the sunglasses prevented the natives from getting glaucoma, like Pharmakeia says, or that the sunglasses caused cancer. One of these things is true. All right, so we ask the question, what are we asking? What does the Bible say? Sunlight good. So, number one must be false, because if it were true, that would mean that sunlight is bad, but God does not lie. Therefore, number 2 must be true, that sunglasses actually caused cancer. All right, here's the story. This is from Dr. John Ott. He is an exceedingly well-known photobiologist from the 60s and 70s. And I have many modern books on sunlight therapy. And every single one of those books, they quote this guy. He was out of the box thinking. He was not a pharmakeia agent. He was a researcher. All right, this is what he said. At a dinner given prior to one of my lectures, I sat next to the daughter of the late Dr. Albert Schweitzer. Our conversation dwelt mostly on her experiences as assistant to her father at Lamborghini on the west coast of Africa. I asked her about the rate of cancer of the people in that area, and she replied that when her father had first started the hospital, they found no cancer at all, but that now it was a problem. So I asked if the people living there had started installing glass windows and electric light in their otherwise simple surroundings, and she said they had not. Then I half jokingly asked her if any of the natives wore sunglasses. Oh man, she looked startled and then told me that the natives paddling in their dugout canoes up and down the river in front of the hospital often wore no more than a loincloth and sunglasses. And indeed, some wore only the sunglasses. She further explained that sunglasses represented a status symbol of civilization and education and had a higher bartering value than beads and other such trinkets. So, even though natives are in the tropical sunlight all day, every day naked, their entire lives, they experience no cancer. But when they start distorting the sunlight that enters the eyes by wearing sunglasses all day, every day, cancer is the sure result. Cancer was not caused by sunlight to the skin, but distorted sunlight to the eyes. This is no small discovery, folks. This should have been published abroad and kept before the people of the world. Now it falls on us to do that. This has massive implications in every aspect of our lives. Yet the same agencies that tell us that sunlight is carcinogenic tell us that wearing sunglasses is important for healthy eyes. When we humans started wearing sunglasses, that was when we really started messing with God's natural order of things. All right, back to Dr. John Ott. He tells this story. One of my friends had been troubled with skin cancer and on several occasions had undergone minor surgery. He was again having considerable difficulty, and his physician had recommended further surgery. However, on his own initiative, he decided to try the same UV ocular therapy that he was giving his wife for her eye condition. Immediately, his skin cancers began to disappear. And within a matter of 4 or 5 months, his skin appeared perfectly normal without surgery or other treatment. Hey, I think we're going to start seeing a pattern here that God's healthcare is outdoors and it's simple and does not require labor or effort. You know, that my Eden series goes into detail on that. Now, here is that ocular therapy that Dr. Ott was talking about. 3 things. Spend as much time as possible outdoors. Full body exposure as much as possible. Avoid wearing any eyewear and looking through glass. Avoid artificial light sources, including TV. And now that includes computer screens and monitors and your phones, etc., etc., etc. All right, lung cancer and sunglasses. Still John Ott. A personal friend of mine told me of an acquaintance of his, a man in his early 70s who had just been diagnosed as having terminal lung cancer. Terminal lung cancer. This man lived in the Southwest and wore sunglasses most of the time. My friend sent him a copy of My Ivory Cellar, that's Dr. John's book, he has 3 of them, and a set of the instruction sheets that had been given to the 15 patients in New York City for living outdoors as much as possible and avoiding artificial light sources. The elderly lung cancer patient agreed to follow the instructions. The tumor completely disappeared, and he lived for approximately 8 years before dying of a heart issue. Yes, sunglasses are messing with the natural order of things. Got cancer? Check your glasses. Prostate cancer versus pink eyeglasses. Dr. John Ott speaking. An elderly acquaintance had been diagnosed with prostate cancer, and surgery had been recommended. I found that he had for many years been wearing eyeglasses with a light pink tint, and I was able to persuade him to stop wearing these and get some new full spectrum, clear UV transmitting spectacles. I advised him to cut down as much as possible on watching TV and to spend more time outdoors, or at least on an open screened porch. He has now gone for 3 years without surgery, and the problem has apparently disappeared. Now, there are several other stories available concerning pink and light on our health, just not enough time to present them. I'm going to back up 2 slides. Excuse me. Where'd that go? There it is. Full spectrum clear UV transmitting spectacles. The only company that I am aware of anywhere in the world that makes clear UV transmitting spectacles are in Canada. And I just a couple hours ago finished putting it up on my website, the link to that company and my take on it. So look up the SunCure.com, the SunCure.com, and you'll find that page. Excuse me, under the light equipment category or button. All right, let me go back or forward. Now, leukemia outbreak traced back to green curtains and warm or pink fluorescent lighting. Excuse me. Leukemia is a blood cancer. Now, this story is another example of cancer developing because the light entering the eyes has been filtered and distorted. Here is the 2-minute clip. Let's see if it works.
Here's the St. John Brebeuf School in Niles, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. In 1963, the Communicable Disease Center of the U.S. Public Health Service in Atlanta reported an unusually high rate of leukemia with the children attending this school, the highest rate of any school in the country, 5 times the national average. Many of the national cancer agencies, both public and private, have investigated this situation, but no positive explanation for this unusually high rate of leukemia has been found. And until an explanation is available, I believe that every possible clue should be explored. With this in mind, I visited the school and learned some interesting bits of information not previously uncovered. All but one of the leukemia cases were in 2 classrooms, where the teachers followed the practice of keeping the curtains closed at all times because of the glare from the large areas of glass used in constructing the building. This then meant keeping the high-intensity fluorescent lights on continuously, which at the time of the high leukemia incidence happened to be the Deluxe warm white fluorescent tube, which is the pinkest of any of the standard tubes used for ordinary lighting purposes. In checking all the available records, I learned that this leukemia cluster, as this type of situation is commonly referred to, developed shortly after the teachers in these 2 rooms were transferred to this school and started to keep the curtains closed regardless of the weather and the fluorescent lights turned on all the time. I further learned that this situation had disappeared shortly after these same teachers were transferred on to other schools. And coincidentally, at this same time, all of the Deluxe warm white tubes were old and were replaced with cool white, which, though not a full spectrum type of tube, do represent less distortion than the Deluxe warm white when compared to natural sunlight.
Okay, now that was Dr. John Ott speaking, and he talks here as well. He says, he's telling another story. The cover story of Time magazine about 10 or 15 years ago mentioned such a complete remission of cancer. A man, upon being told he had cancer, immediately stopped going to his office and started reading in a rocking chair on an open back porch and also working in his rose garden. The cancer, his terminal cancer, disappeared, and he became a medically proven case of complete remission. That means cure, or it should mean cure. Notice how simple that was. Another example of the idea that God's healthcare system is outdoors and automatic and free and simple and easy. Another one, same thing, Dr. Ott. A Scandinavian doctor discovered that she had terminal cancer. She was a great nutritionist and thought fresh fish from the sea would be helpful because they contained all the minerals from the sea and would be the freest of artificial preservatives and other additives. She gave up her practice and went to a small town in northern Norway where living was very simple, and went out with the fishermen every day to help catch her fish. She too became a case of complete remission. But when she prescribed fresh fish in the diets of her patients back in the city, it didn't work. And why didn't it work? Because it wasn't about the fish. It was about working in the sunlight and the fresh air in exercise. This may be why Ellen White said that labor performed outdoors is 10 times more beneficial than labor performed indoors. Breast cancer versus sunlight. Women who live in the sunniest areas and have the highest exposure to sunlight have a 65% reduction in breast cancer risk compared to those who have the least sunlight exposure. Sun exposure actually increases melanoma survival. This original study enrolled 528 white residents of Connecticut diagnosed with invasive cutaneous melanoma. Sun exposure was statistically significantly inversely associated with risk of death from melanoma, regardless of the measure used. Now, the next slide is very important. It's a little wordy, but knowing how this study came about will give it credibility, and it will change our thinking on the matter of skin cancer forever. And there's two slides here, not one. This is the conclusion of these two. I'll say that first. Only about 6% of lesions excised or cut out of the flesh as excised as melanoma actually are melanoma. Really? Here's the story. This is a quote. Stunningly, the American Academy of Dermatology published a report, they actually published this, showing that most melanoma diagnoses may be incorrect. Approximately 44 different authors contributed to that report. They made an accuracy in detection analysis based on the number of melanomas that needed to be excised during a period of 10 years, compared to the actual number that were excised. Many clinics in different countries were involved in assessing the numbers. A total of 300,215 cases were found where excision took place. Of those cases, there were only 17,172 melanomas that really required excision, and 283,043 that were excised and turned out to be benign lesions. Therefore, there were about 16.5 non-melanoma lesions removed for each lesion that was cancerous, and only about 6% were legitimate cancers. Oh, man. Benign refers to a condition, tumor, or growth that is not cancerous. In other words, 6% means that There is no skin cancer epidemic. Just the opposite, isn't it? But here's the rub. The original diagnosis of melanoma for that 94% who were misdiagnosed remains on the books and continues to be left in the cancer statistics, making it still appear as though there is an epidemic of skin cancer. Well, that isn't nefarious at all, is it? This is no accident. By the way, this also means that 94% of these people that were disfigured, like the picture you see here, didn't have to be. And they received neither refund nor apology. This slide and the next two slides verify the nefarious nature of the cancer industry and the merchants of pharmakeia. Here we go. There's a chart here showing as the rise of dermatologists increased per capita, so did the rise of melanomas. And the melanoma has been shown to follow the increase of dermatologists for 33 years. That should make you angry and wary and a lot smarter. All right, myth number 2, we are told that sunscreen prevents cancer. This one also verifies the nefarious nature. Sunscreen seems to enable cancer. The green line that you see is the increase in sunscreen sales in millions. The yellow and the pink lines representing men and women. Melanoma in both sexes followed that dermatology line for 64 years. There's no margin of error there. This is being done on purpose. This is nefarious. Sunscreen does not work. It enables cancer. When God warned us in the Bible of the worldwide deceptions of pharmakeia, I'm thinking he might have actually been serious about it. Kind of like, he meant what he said. Sunscreens seem to enable cancer. This one is about Queensland, Australia. Isn't that where you guys are at? The rise in melanoma has been exceptionally high in Queensland, where the medical establishment has long and vigorously promoted the use of sunscreens. Queensland now has more incidences of melanoma per capita than any other place. Worldwide, the greatest rise in melanoma has been experienced in countries where chemical sunscreens have been heavily promoted. All right, moving on. Myth number 3. We are told that our God's sunlight causes cataracts and macular degeneration. You think that's true? We'll see. This is cataract surgery, replacing a fogged up lens with a synthetic lens using a lens speculum to keep the lid open. I tell you that, or I show you this to tell you this. Edward C. Condrat, he's a doctor, world's leading homeopathic ophthalmologist. He says, in my residency in ophthalmology, it was widely accepted that ultraviolet light is a cause of cataracts and macular degeneration. This is based on a study that was published in the American Journal of Ophthalmology, 1982, March 93, pages 299 to 306, titled The Action Spectrum for Retinal Injury from Near Ultraviolet Radiation in the Aphakic Monkey. The conclusion was that near ultraviolet produced irreparable damage to the rod and cone photoreceptors. But one needs to look closely at the design of that study. Now, I'm stating a warning to you right now. You will not like what you are just about to hear, and it gets progressively worse. People have cried over this. I've had when I read it. But we need to hear the truth. So, this is what he's talking about. Those monkeys had their lenses sliced off their eyeballs. Thus, no lens protection. Number 2, Their eyes were then chemically dilated, preventing the normal constriction and protection to bright lights. Number 3, a lid speculum was placed in the eyes to hold the eyes open, preventing blinking. Number 4, I'm so sorry. A 2,500 watt xenon ultraviolet lamp was aimed at their eyes for up to 16 minutes. Did we not just talk about evil intent? According to Dr. John Ott, this is like someone putting their hand in a blast furnace and concluding that heat is bad for our homes. So, no, sunlight does not cause cataracts and macular degeneration. Man does that, and our living habits do that. So what do you think would be the properly calibrated response to this dreadful story? Revulsion? Rage? Horror? Anger? How about a decided determination to test every spirit, especially the medical and science spirits? Woe unto them who call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness. This relates, in 1964, John Ott, along with Dr. Irving Leopold, studied the effects of light on rabbit retinal pigment epithelial cells, in other words, the eye. They documented that retinal pigment epithelia would not divide unless they were exposed to low levels of ultraviolet light. Oh, it's becoming intriguing here. What this means is that UV light is necessary for our eye health. It's severe deprivation of UV light that might be a contributing cause of macular degeneration. Interesting. Now, when he says that it won't divide, that simply means that the cells will not be able to replicate themselves or regenerate without sunlight. So again, the so-called scientific proof that sunlight causes macular degeneration has been proven to be false. And of course, out of harmony with the word of God. We have got to stop putting our faith into mortal man's medical machinations and doctors. We need to, how do you say this? We need to put our faith in God and ask God what he thinks we should do when we are sick, not just a doctor. All right, myth number 4. We are told that cancer develops on the skin that is most exposed to sunlight. Well, that's not true. It's been shown that approximately 75% of the tumors occur on the relatively unexposed body sites. That's it for that one. Number 5, also short. We are told that 10 to 15 minutes per day of sunlight to face and hands is all we need. Well, the result of this claim is that we gain a false sense of security that we are getting enough sunlight to stay healthy when we are not. This would take a very long time to work up a tan. Now, I'm going to be talking about tan in just a bit, so this is important. Now, look at how tan this young boy is 1 year after he started treatment, and he's healed. Sunlight did that. All right. The amazing recoveries at the SunCure clinics in Switzerland were not achieved with 15 minutes a day to hands and feet. It was daily, full body exposure that enabled such miraculous results, and they worked up to it. We are to get as much sunlight as possible. 15 minutes to face and hands may help us to survive, but absolutely not to thrive. It is far from therapeutic levels. Remember, God placed Adam and Eve in a garden, in the sunlight, all day, every day, naked. Now, myth number 6. We are told that skin cancer is more likely if we have ever been seriously sunburned. Well, individuals who had ever been severely sunburned or who had high levels of intermittent sun exposure were less likely to die from melanoma than the individuals who had never been severely sunburned or who had low levels of intermittent sun exposure, respectively. So he's debunking yet another lie. Now this is just about to get interesting. The really interesting stuff. Myth number 7. We are told that our God's sunlight causes sunburn. Wait, what? That's a myth? Oh, man. If you think that's hard to believe, wait till you see this. Number 8. We are told that tanning is a protective mechanism against sunlight triggered by sunburn. Okay, these two myths are combined because they go hand in hand. Can't talk about one without the other. So we start with sunburn. Sorry, this is the second presentation on this I've given today, so my voice is kind of raw. Here we go. So, what about the very idea of sunburn? Does it make sense to you that God would create our sun to burn us? That's a simple yes or no. Okay, next. Yet no one can deny that sunlight causes sunburn, right? It's just a given. Of course it causes sunburn. We're looking at it. We've experienced it. Yet God pronounced sunlight good. And God's word is never wrong. He cannot lie. So we have a conundrum. God's unfailing word or man's undeniable experience. Are we to deny our own experience? Yes, of course. Let God be true, but every man a liar. Romans 3:4. We don't have the big picture. We are to deny our own experience, our own senses, if they contradict God's word, which leaves only one conclusion. And I told you this would be interesting. Man has done or is doing something that is not in harmony with God's Eden health principles, thus thwarting or distorting the healing rays of God's sunlight, causing unnatural reactions. Oh, man. Well, that could make some sense because way back when scientists first isolated ultraviolet rays, they experimented and found that ultraviolet light caused negative reactions in many different chemicals. So those scientists named this band of UV light chemical rays, and the pioneers used that term all the time. Could it be that sunburn isn't a burn at all, but rather a negative chemical reaction to unnatural toxic chemicals and frankenfoods which have found their way into our bodies? Sunlight was just trying to do its job, but foreign chemicals thwarted it. Now, as I started researching this theory, I immediately began to find 3 confirmations. The next slide lists some of the known chemicals that cause the so-called sun sensitivities. All right, we start with food. High fat processed foods, vegetable oils, concentrates, fried foods, distorted oils, sugar and artificial sweeteners, alcohol, modern grains, many food additives, chlorophyll. Now, don't get me wrong in this. It's not chlorophyll in its natural form. Hold on. It's chlorophyll from concentrates, supplements. A zinc deficiency would do this, cause sun sensitivities. By the way, causing sunburn, these sensitivities, they call it sunburn, sun allergies, sun toxicities, and rashes. Chemicals, any toxic chemical. And of course, chemo and radiation. Many pharmaceuticals, antibiotics, skincare products, sunscreens. Well, I have to just tell you that is to be considered irony. Perfumes and essential oils, heavy metals, that's vaccines, that's teeth filling, that's mercury, that's aluminum. Many of us have had that in us since childhood. Disinfectants, and anything that weakens the liver. Now, these things are the lifelong norm for the typical American. The next slides tell how our bodies are supposed to react in the sunlight when we clean up that chemical dump in our bodies. All right, here it is. This article is entitled Why I Don't Use or Need Sunscreen. It's just this one paragraph. The man says, after changing my diet and ditching the Franken fats in favor of real fats, I found I just don't burn like I once did. If I spend 4 hours doing farm work on a sunny afternoon, my arms and face get a little, what? It didn't say redder, it said browner. My arms and face get a little browner, and that's it. Seeing how the change in diet changed my skin's reaction to sunshine got me thinking, why would the sun be dangerous to humans in the first place? It makes no sense. We need sun on our skin to produce vitamin D naturally. He has no idea what else sunlight can do. Vitamin D is just one thing. Anyway, that was his take. Notice he said browner, not red or pink. Next little article, I excerpted it from 2 of Katie Wells' articles and combined it into one thing. It was entitled, Why I Eat My Sunscreen. She says, I am partially Irish-Scottish, which is Latin for very fair-skinned, and had always burned. In fact, even moderate sun exposure would leave me with a pinkish glow rather than a tan. Until several years ago. Since going grain-free, sugar-free, etc., and incorporating more healthy fats and vegetables, I've noticed I have a sorry, my voice is really being hit. I've noticed I have a higher tolerance to the sun. I not only don't burn, but I'm able to stay out in the sun longer without turning the tiniest bit pink. And I tan more easily than I ever have before, ever, which is saying something since I have red hair. I started working in the garden for hours at a time during the heat of the day, without burning. We also went to Florida for vacation, and I was at the beach for 4 hours between 11 and 3 with no sunscreen, and I didn't burn at all. Okay, we got to make some conclusions on this. We got to talk about this. I had the same sort of burnless experience in the sun when I went through just an 11-day lifestyle health program in Battle Creek, Michigan. You know, if a sunburn isn't what we've been led to believe, then neither is tanning. Did you notice that her detoxified body didn't actually require itself to turn pink before tanning? Let me spell this out to you. This is wildly significant. It tells us that tanning is not a response to skin damage from burning. You don't suppose the pharmaceutical industry lied to us, do you? Now, since Black people are not immune to sunburn, and pale redheads can tan without first burning or even turning pink, then a tan is not what we've been told it is. An unhealthy negative reaction to cancer-causing sunlight, as the merchants of pharmakeia have dogmatically portrayed it to us. It's a healthy reaction. It means that tanned skin is what God intended for us from the very beginning. It means that Adam and Eve were tanned. It's our natural estate. It means that pale skin is the unnatural estate, indicative of an unhealthy condition of the body, which we're going to get into shortly. All this finally fits. For why would God create our sun for our health and then have to protect us from it? The sun is his proxy that represents his light, his righteousness, his goodness, his healing. When he placed Adam and Eve in the garden, in the sunlight, all day, every day, naked, did God then hand them a bottle of sunscreen and a pair of sunglasses? Of course not. So what is the purpose of a tan, if not for protection from the sun? Now, to be an acceptable answer to that question, the explanation must be something that is in harmony with sunlight good, right? Now, history may again provide the answer, or at least the clues. The pioneer practitioners of the SunCure treated end-stage TB patients successfully with sunlight. And they all observed something quite unexpected having to do with the purpose of a tan. You ready? Tanning accelerated healing. Now, this is one of the pioneer doctors speaking, Dr. Harris. He says it has been a common observation among the heliotherapists of the day that the cure of a tuberculosis patient parallels roughly the degree of skin pigmentation, tanning. The greater the tanning, the more rapid the cure. Wow. A common observation among the pioneer practitioners of heliotherapy. How did such an amazing discovery like that get buried? This is remarkable. It's life-changing. Tanning isn't about protecting us from the sun. Tanning makes sunlight more effective for healing. We've just seen that the protection from burning comes from a clean, natural diet, not dark or tan skin. Tan skin was intended to be our natural, healthy estate. Dr. John Harvey Kellogg didn't look at tanning as a protective mechanism from sunlight. He referred to a bronzed body as a healthy tan, and so it is. But we've also been told that a tan makes it more difficult to produce vitamin D. If that's true, why would God do that? Hold on, I had to close the window there. Why would God do that? If vitamin D is as important as we have been led to believe, then why would God shut it off as we tan? Does that make sense to you? And right when we are demonstrating to God that we are serious about using his sunlight. Okay, it's a mystery, isn't it? So, for the sake of argument, let's just say that it is true that tanning diminishes vitamin D production. Given that these pioneers tell us that the greater the pigmentation, the more rapid the cure, we may reasonably, therefore, suspect that vitamin D may not be the only healing mechanism in sunlight, and that perhaps vitamin D may become less necessary as we tan. We don't know this. We're just speculating here. But it fits God's creative word that sunlight is good. So we cannot trust the medical field when they describe God's sunlight, because God pronounced it good and they call it evil. So we can't trust anything they say on it. But right now we can conjecture. Now, we know that our bodies and nature have backup, overlapping, redundant health systems. If a tan shuts off vitamin D, then we may reasonably suspect that we either have enough vitamin D and or that some other healing property of nature takes over. What if vitamin D is more of a first stage sort of mechanism that opens the way for the next phase of healing as we tan? I think that's a reasonable question. Now, Dr. Rollier addresses that possibility on page 24 of his book, Heliotherapy 1927. Here's what he said. Dr. Roselette and I were able to prove that the actions of ultraviolet rays is a superficial one, and that they become, as it were, exhausted in the upper skin layers when pigmentation takes place. Since, however, I find that patients with deep-seated TB, tuberculosis, are cured when they have that pigmentation, I must logically conclude that it is just that very pigmentation that renders deep penetration of the long rays possible. There are also deeper penetrating rays whose bactericidal power is considerable. The long-wave rays, and particularly the infrared ones, have strong bactericidal properties. All right. This may partially, so far, explain the accelerated healing as we tan. The heat rays enable the increased killing rate of harmful bacteria such as TB, and that partners with UV to improve circulation. Now, there are about 1,500 different wavelengths in sunlight, and they are all there for all sorts of different reasons that we are not privy to. This is why I focus on history's stories of healing rather than the theories of the merchants of pharmakeia who have absolutely no experience treating patients with sunlight, only the false theories that claim that God's sunlight is bad. This is why, folks, we test every spirit. Now, the next slide is Dr. Kellogg's observations on the value of tanning from a completely different perspective altogether. Yet both Rollier's and Kellogg's observations coexist in harmony and are consistent with God's pronouncement, sunlight good. Here it is. He says, the improved circulation. This is about in circulation? The improved circulation of the skin, which accompanies the pigmentation. Wait a minute, improved circulation accompanies pigmentation? Tanning? Well, that's interesting. The improved circulation of the skin, which accompanies the pigmentation, is always attended by a relief from a multitude of disagreeable symptoms. Now, no doctor has ever said that to you or me or anyone we know. Continuing on. And if these general light applications are supplemented by other indicated physiological measures and by proper regulation of the diet and general habits of life, multitudes of cases, incurable by other means, may be, in the course of a few months, restored to excellent health. Now, these two men of science, Dr. Kellogg and Dr. Rollier, had to be the most the experts, the worldwide experts on sunlight in practice, not just theory. So when they say this, that multiple cases of incurable diseases can be overcome by sunlight, by a tan, we need to hear that. Now, the observations from these three SunCure doctors finally begin to give us a clue as to the real purpose of a tan. And it's not to protect us from a disease-causing sun. No wonder sunlight has been attacked so aggressively for so long by Satan and his minions and his human agents. This is an enormous, brilliantly shining gem of healing information. And just so you know, Kellogg's statement is not stated in the context of TB only, but rather a general healing principle for the treatment of the sick. I know, I went back and checked. In other words, it thoroughly applies to you and us today in this world we live in. You don't have to have TB for this to apply to you. Application, we need to get the sick into the sunlight and get them tanned to give them relief from a multitude of disagreeable symptoms. Don't just get your patients into the sun 10 or 15 minutes. Oh, go get a few minutes of sunlight. No, that's stage one. You got to get them through stage two. Get them tanned. This means that sunlight therapy takes time, consistent, persevering time to allow all the stages of sunlight's healing properties to work. The first stage is vitamin D production. The second stage is tanning. Still theory, but I think it works. The counsel that we all need is 10 to 15 minutes of sunlight to the hands and face is a ruse. The sick must be tanned. The more skin exposure, the better and faster the results. Now, the question is asked, just how does tanning and an improved skin circulation accelerate healing. Well, Dr. Kellogg has pretty powerful things to say about that. I'm only going to give about a quarter of it, but that's all we have time for. But it's really juicy stuff anyway. Here it is. Phototherapy. This is him talking. Phototherapy could include artificial light therapy with UV or sunlight or both. So phototherapy is a useful means of producing local and general hyperemia of the skin for relief of the visceral congestion, which is rarely absent in chronic disease. I'm going to stop for a moment and explain that. Hyperemia means a lot of extra blood in the skin. And when that blood is removed from the visceral to the skin, it relieves visceral congestion, which is rarely absent in chronic disease. See? Now, the pallor of the skin, which is nearly always present in chronic invalids, signifies not only anemia of the skin, but necessarily implies also congestion of the viscera. Think about the implications to that. Now, he's going to start including muscles in this too. Here, the general muscular weakness which accompanies chronic disease prevents exercise, so that the muscles as well as the skin are anemic. The importance of this fact will be recognized when it is considered that the muscles, when active, are capable of holding 1/2 of all the blood in the body. The idle muscle contains not more than 1/4 or 1/6 as much blood as the active muscle. Oh man, a pale skin and inactive muscles together necessarily imply congested viscera. This chronic congestion of vital organs necessarily results in derangement of functions. Oh, that's not bad enough. And often in change of structure of those organs. We had no idea that pale skin and inactivity had such incredible, far-reaching health consequences to us. Oh my. So, that's why God intended us to be tanned, to keep our circulation in balance, which will decongest the internal organs. They'll keep them decongested, and it will relieve a multitude of disagreeable symptoms or prevent it. We need to be tanned. So, how long does the improved skin circulation of a thorough tan last? All right, Dr. Kellogg answers that very important question in the next slide. He says, Hasselbach noted that the increased vascularity of the skin induced by tanning lasts for 6 to 9 months. Whoa, that is excellent news for us. So let's put this together. The healthy effects of sunbathing in the warm season will keep us healthy through the winter. It will carry us through. Both the increased circulation of the skin via a tan and the vitamin D built up and stored by sunbathing will carry us through the winter. God made provisions for the curse of sin upon the earth, which resulted in winter weather. But we must avail ourselves of those provisions while they are available if we are to remain healthy in the wintertime. So all right. Does sunbathing boost the immune system? Yes. Well, absolutely. Dr. Kellogg says the increase of leukocytes occurs within half an hour after a general application of light and may amount to as much as 90%. But the average increase is 25 to 30%. Hold on. Okay. The remarkable increase in the immunizing power of the blood demonstrated by Dr. Leonard Hill and his associates suggests that the skin may play an important part in defending the body against infection by raising the immunizing power of the blood under the influence of sunlight rays. That's interesting. Folks, if we intend to survive what's already coming for us, we must get into the sunlight and get ourselves tanned when we have opportunity. Pick a time, doesn't matter. If there's sunlight, get out into it if you can. Dr. Kellogg stated, this is interesting, the tanned skin is able to defend itself against cold and to protect the body against disease much more efficiently than the pale, anemic skin which has not been kissed by the sun. He continues, the pigmented skin of one habituated to sun exposure is much more resistant to infection. Febrile rashes such as chickenpox affect least the well-pigmented areas. Ellen White said, the feeble one should press out into the sunshine as earnestly and naturally as do the shaded plants and vines. The pale and sickly grain blade that has struggled up out of the cold of early spring puts out the natural and healthy deep green after enjoying, for a few days, the health and life-giving rays of the sun. Go out into the light and warmth of the glorious sun, you pale and sickly ones, and share with vegetation its life-giving, health-dealing power. The TB patients at Leysen, Switzerland spent more time in the sunlight and had more skin exposure than anyone, some of them for years in the sunlight, yet they never developed cancer. If there was ever any group of people whose immune systems were seriously compromised, it was these end-stage dying patients at Leysen. They would have been wildly susceptible to cancer if sunlight actually caused cancer. These SunCure patients also proved that cancer is not caused by sunlight, and that when placed on a cleansing vegetarian diet, they were no longer sensitive to sunlight, and they no longer burned, and they recovered in the sunlight. So, as we come to the end of this presentation, we can't help but notice an interesting parallel. If we approach the light of God's presence in a spiritually polluted state, his light will be as a consuming fire to us. If we approach God's proxy light, sunlight, in a physically polluted state, we will also burn. Our task is to assist nature in her efforts to expel impurities, so our patients can receive rapid healing in the sunlight. In conclusion, as we have tested here the so-called medical science that calls God's light darkness and darkness light, the pattern is revealed and the conviction takes hold that it is spiritual and medical madness to place mortal man's reason and science above God's revelations. It is the God of Israel alone who heals. His agencies alone are blessed. Everything else is a counterfeit. God bids us use the natural agencies he has provided to cooperate with him in healing us. He blesses his agencies for our healing as we use them, not pharmakeia. And using them is a public expression of our trust in God as our healer and protector. We are to be witnesses for the power of his blessed healing agents. Yet to be the most effective witnesses, the most effective medical missionaries, and the healthiest we can be, we must reboot our health reform thinking and our efforts and start back at the very beginning. And God saw the light that it was good. Let me shut off this screen. Stop the sharing. And back to you.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, we can see you now. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Brother John. last presentation did put the groundwork for this one. You have answered a lot of the questions we had from last presentation, so it is really good. And it seems like I mentioned last time, it seems like what you're sharing is quite the opposite of what we have learned and what we've been taught. So it's good to learn, and it seems like even Dr. Kellogg and the pioneers of the faith and the health message, they knew a lot more than what we do now.
Yes, indeed.
So yeah, that's incredible. I do know of people, the people have been talking to me and saying that when they go out in the sun or when they are even driving in their car, they have to use scarves and hats on their head to make sure that they are protected from the sun. And it is a shame that that's what we know today, that we need to protect ourselves instead of take advantage of the sun. So
Yep.
yeah,
We need to adopt a lifestyle that's actually healthy food. And the older we get, this is from experience, the older we get, the less margin of error we have, and the more strict we have to be with our health principles, with living a healthy life.
Yeah, that's true. We can't get away with as much. I feel that as well. So I just want to remind everyone that you can send in your questions. We've been getting questions on different platforms. It seems like not everyone can access YouTube live chat, which I'm not sure why that is the case. But just based on what you mentioned, Brother John, I just want to share someone's experience that they sent me a message saying they initially had a question, but you answered that question. And so the testimony was that their mother at the beach, the mother tanned her legs and got sunburned. She developed melanoma, skin cancer below her knee. The doctor operated and removed the melanoma and said that if the cancer doesn't reappear within the next 5 years, she'll have no further problems. However, in the 5th year, the cancer appeared in her brain and she died 6 weeks after the diagnosis. So she was wondering why the sun caused it then, and then she didn't use any sunscreen either. And you mentioned that could have been the diet, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Since I don't know her case and I'm not a doctor, I can't speak deeply to that. But if the sun triggered the cancer, let's just do a what if. What if she was really toxic? What if it had already started working and the cancer was already there, but the negative reaction to the chemicals that were in her triggered by the sunlight? What if that triggered the spot there on the knee? Don't know.
Yeah, like you said, it's more if we view it more as a chemical reaction. That's a new way of thinking about it, which makes a lot more sense when you think about it.
Yes.
So the same person says that she used to get sunburned whenever she tanned, and she changed her diet when she went to Vietnam on a holiday, and she was eating plant-based foods. And in Vietnam, apparently, that's actually really a convenient thing to do. And she was amazed that she didn't burn like before, instead developed a nice tan. So that's her testimony.
I have a comment on that. When I presented it to another church group this morning, someone else had a similar testimony in Guam. Someone who always burned really badly. They went to Guam and they said, there's something there that I got tan really easily and without ever burning. So it was one or both of two things. She replaced her diet because it's a different diet there, she stopped eating perhaps bad stuff and started eating good stuff. But they said this very interesting thing, that certain foods, orange and red foods, actually prevents people from burning in the sunlight. And there was a story behind it. I don't remember it all, but they were telling me about that today. and other people have kind of verified it. So I don't know, don't remember that formula, but beets, yeah, it was beets, carrots, and I think sweet potato, because orange or whatever, something like that. And there's some sort of recipe that people have discovered helps them not to burn.
That is, yeah, that is incredible. So that's just to back up what you had to say. So we had we have a question. Cecilia, do you want to enable your microphone, and you can ask your question if that's how you prefer to. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Brother John, for that presentation. I was just curious, on the list that you posted, some food can cause accelerate some, like problem with the sun in the skin, and you listed one of them, concentrated chlorophyll. Now, I'm just wondering, so if we take green barley or wheatgrass, would that be considered as concentrated chlorophyll, or is it talking about chlorophyll in the liquid form, or is that what you mean? And the second question is modern grain. So does that mean that we have to avoid all grain, or is just organic grain is okay? Because God give us grain. I suppose if you talk about hybridized wheat, then maybe that's your issue. So what is your...
Yes, that was the issue. We had that conversation again earlier today as well. It was, I think we all came to a consensus that because of the severely hybridized grains out there over the years, they're not how God intended, but we are to look for ancient grains, and there's several of those. I don't have a name of any particular one that don't seem to have the same gluten problems as our modern hybridized grains. Now the chlorophyll, I realized I'm missing something in my memory of that chlorophyll. It wasn't just concentrated, it was something else that they did to it, and I neglected to put that in there. Now I don't know where it is, but something about artificial, how they processed it or something. So yeah, I should probably take that out until I fully understand that one. So I can't really answer that right now. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia.
Yeah. We personally use Emma. I use Emma sometimes. We use kamut as well, which is the same as Khorasan, I think. Those are ancient grains.
Ancient grains?
Yeah, those are ancient grains. Yeah, kamut and Emma, and I think spelt is also.
Oh yes, yes.
Yeah, and ancient.
Someone this morning was a lady was saying that spelt bread relieves her of all those symptoms, and that she was going to post it to our group on that a bread recipe for spelt, and she says it tastes better than regular bread. Has that been your experience, that it tastes better than regular traditional bread?
I don't have experience with comparing spelt with other types of bread. We like the taste of kamut usually, but again, this is controversy as well about fermented versus non-fermented or cultured, whether we should have sourdough, because that helps with digestion as well and bioavailability. So that's another question that people.
Well, I have a question for you on that. I have something in my head that suggests that Ellen White might have suggested that we use sourdough. Is that true?
She said the bread should be light and sweet, and some presenters we had, Dr. Clark, for example, he says that sourdough is basically disqualified for that reason because it's sour. But then we had also Barbara O'Neill, who said sourdough should not be sour. If it's done correctly, it should be light and sweet. So I personally don't have a problem. And it doesn't
involve yeast, right?
Yeah, it shouldn't involve yeast.
That's a big thing. That's because I'm apparently allergic, not allergic, but sensitive to all kinds of yeast. And I know back then in the days of the pioneers, they made something called gems. They were little things about that big. You familiar with that? And they had this cast iron metal things made just for that. So you could put these little things in that cast iron thing and bake them. But it didn't involve yeast. What they did was they she said, whipped up or beat up the dough so it's light and fluffy or whatever, something like that. Beat it up, put it in a really hot oven, and it'll rise. If I'm remembering that correctly. Haven't done that yet.
That's what Dr. Clark said as well, that you can do that either in the oven or on a pan. I've tried it on a pan. It's just flat pancake type of bread. That's what I succeeded to make. So it works. And yeah, I did wonder for a while what the jams were and how to make them. So yeah.
I believe at Historic Adventist Village in Battle Creek at their visitor center, they either sell or know where to get those bread pans for gems. Maybe someone would email them if they wanted to know, but they show them on display in Ellen White's house, the pans.
That's interesting. And could it be waffle like pans as well, that like waffle makers as well could be an option for just
That
enough
I don't
heat.
know. You'd probably know more than me. I don't know.
Yeah, and my mother-in-law is reminding me about the unleavened bread that we make. So we make unleavened bread at home as well, just like communion bread, a bit thicker, but then the oil issue comes in. If anyone wants to avoid oil, that won't work. So we make it with olive oil or coconut oil.
It's hard to find the perfect stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so there was another question about the limit on how long do we need to be out in the sunlight each day. I believe you answered that question in our last presentation, but is there a limit, or you were talking about gradually tanning for that protection, right?
Yes, there is no limit, but there is a way to start, and we start very, very slowly. Like Dr. Rollier, every single patient that he, when they came in, they were sensitive to the sunlight. And so, because they were so toxic. Wow. So he started sunlight to their feet for 5 minutes, just to the feet. Everything else was covered for 5 minutes. And he did that 3 times in a day. And then the next day, he raised up the protective sheet or whatever, so it's including up to their knees, and 5 minutes 3 times a day. And it just kept going like that, really, really, really slow. And it will, and if they didn't tolerate it the first time, they don't increase more body parts. So we do very carefully. That's the only advice on that I have.
Yes. Okay, so we have some questions on YouTube as well. One of them is, how does one get enough sunlight in winter states?
Well, the Battle Creek Sanitarium used artificial sunbaths. And the goal back then was to create artificial sunlight sources that reproduced sunlight as closely as possible. That's not really the case anymore, not so much. But yes, there are tanning lamps, and there are tanning beds, and there are tanning apparatus designed just for that. That's what we can do. I mean, if we haven't stored up vitamin D or a tan during the summer, that's the sort of thing we need to do. It's not a perfect world anymore. We do what we can. We do what is in our hand. That includes vitamin D. If that's all you got, then vitamin D it is.
And because vitamin D is fat soluble, you can store it in your body for winter, right? That's
Yes.
how we're made, to store it for winter.
Yes.
Okay, so also someone is asking about the Paina and Chi, and sometimes is described as originating from the sun, air, ground, connecting the elements. Sister White used the term vital force to expel toxins, describing with drugs, medications that are not good. So do you have any comments on that? It's like yoga term.
Is that what the first thing you said? Did you say chi?
Yes. Pena, I think Pena or Pena and Chi.
What is that?
That's a yoga term. Again,
Oh.
apparently just originating from the sun, air, ground. It's more of a spiritualistic aspect to what Ellen White was saying, the vital force.
So is that a comment or a question?
It's a question, or the person in the end says it's not the same, right? When Ellen White was talking about the vital force.
Oh,
It's
no,
not
no.
the same.
That is not the same. She described the vital force. She said that Adam and Eve had, if they didn't have, they had 20 times the life force that we currently do, that she in her age has. She says if they didn't have that, our human race would have been extinct a long time ago. Vital force means how well everything works and how much electrical strength is in you to recall your, for your memory, etc., and to resist disease. So we have been very, very diminished in our life force. But no, it's not a spiritual thing, what she says. And it's not related to the chi and all that sort of stuff. That's something different. I'm not an expert on that part, but I know it's different.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so another viewer says, back in 2009, I had to get a TB test in order to work at the nursing home. Do you know if I was injected with TB? Is there anything I can do today?
Would you read it again, please? One more time.
Okay, so back in 2009, I had to get a TB test in order to work at the nursing home. Do you know if I was injected with TB? Is there anything I can do today? So
Yeah,
there's a
supposedly,
test.
yes, you were injected with supposedly an inactive form of TB. I was a respiratory therapist for 20 years. They did that to me. Now, what you can do to do for what? Maybe I missed that.
What can I do today? So, Sister Veronica, do you mean what you can do to reverse that? Is that maybe what it's implying? Is there anything I can do today, like to reverse, or I'm assuming that may be the question.
Well, here's a practical answer until she gets something up here. Tell me, interrupt me when if you see it comes. But like I say, I was a respiratory therapist for 20 years, and I quit when they tried to force a vaccine on me. This is a broad statement. Get out of the medical field if you're in it. At least don't go to the temples of pharmakeia. If you had to have, this is why I couldn't no longer work in the medical field in a hospital, because they insisted that they jabbed stuff into me. And that now would include a TB test for me, because who knows what other hidden payload is in that TB test. I don't trust, well, it's very difficult for me to trust anything that comes in a vial anymore, now that we know what they were willing to do to us without our knowledge or without our consent, and what was in those actual vaccines. So
yes, so she said yes, that was what was implied. What can she do today to reverse, I guess,
to reverse
the damage done?
To
cleanse of anything harmful to my body, she says.
Well, TB was overcome by sunlight. That's the answer.
Yes.
Sunlight purifies the blood, and it was shown time and time again to reverse the most wretched of TB cases. That's my answer.
Awesome. So let me see. We don't have much time, but let's just see the patients with osteopenia, also cured by the sun. Would you suggest supplements like calcium, and what other minerals would you suggest to rebuild bone?
I suggest you don't take any supplement. Excuse me. From history has shown us through the stories of history that taking these supplements can cause all sorts of problems, and that things that deal with osteopenia or bone problems, sunlight does, exercise does, the right diet does, and grounding does. God has multiple ways to do the same thing. Redundant, overlapping, backup systems, those four things. The best way to do all of that is to get out in the garden and work in the garden, get your hands in the soil.
Wonderful. So the question, one of our viewers again is asking, for those who had cataract surgery and have artificial lenses inserted, will they still benefit from sunlight?
I don't know for sure. I can only guess. Yes, I would think so. But it is an artificial lens, which means it probably has different qualities within it, which may absorb UV rather than pass it through. I don't know. I'm not an expert on that. We had the same question this morning too, by the way, which I couldn't answer that one any better either. Now, he told me today that the doctors tell him, since you have these artificial lenses, you have to avoid sunlight in the eyes. Well, that's kind of a death sentence. Thou shalt not do that. It's a cancer-causing advice. What if maybe he didn't tell me why the doctor said that, but what if the doctor said that because sunlight might yellow those artificial lenses? Just a guess.
Interesting. And Brother John, you were talking about pink glasses, pink tinted glasses. What about just the normal prescription glasses? Because I wear them to drive or to see far. So what do you say about them? Do they have to be like a specific one that don't, that let the UV come through, or all of them, if they're not tinted, will be pretty good to wear?
Looking through glass is not a good thing for us. If we have a lifestyle of it, it will hurt us badly. So I just put up, like I said, I just put up on my website, thesuncure.com, the glasses, the only company I know that makes these, they sell UV transmitting glasses, either prescription or reader glasses. It's on my website. It was hard to find. I wish there were other companies, but it's the only one that makes those things where sunlight can get through a significant amount of UV. That's what I recommend.
Wonderful. And just wanted to mention as well, Brother John, to clarify, because you were talking about we need almost full body exposure to the sun to get the full benefits, right? As a ministry that focuses on modesty as well, you mentioned last time too that we need to in private sunbake. Is that right?
Yes, true. Now, when I said we need to, that is the ideal. Now, how many of us live in an ideal world? The Morris, Ellen White said she needs to get as much sunlight as possible for her health. And the Garden of Eden scenario showed that as well. You put them in there, get as much sunlight as possible. Whether you're sick or whether you're healthy, get sunlight as much as you can. The ideal, none of us are ever going to be able to achieve.
Yeah, that's right. So you mentioned last time as well, find a private spot. I think those who live in apartments maybe will have a bit of trouble to do that, but houses with fences and stuff could be good for that. Okay, so you were saying something about, just to finish off, Brother John, you were saying about skin cancer in Aboriginals in Australia. And I wondered about this as well. It seems like whatever article I'm looking at, it's the pigment that they are talking about, because their skin is more pigmented and you know, it can resist the sun better. That's why they don't have as many occurrences of skin cancer. So that's what I wondered as well, that because of migrating, the people with fair skin migrating to climates that are hotter, or, you know, will get more sun exposure. That's what the article, Cancer Council, and it's an Australian website, Cancer WA. That website suggests that it's the pigment, because their skin is more pigmented. That's why they don't have as much skin cancer.
Interesting. And do you
Yeah.
believe it's the pigment that's doing it? Why they don't have cancer? You don't have to answer that.
Yeah, I believe that could contribute, of course, to not burning, but the article overall seems to be quite evolution based.
Yes, certainly.
So,
Well, they're just in the sun longer. And I was
yeah.
wondering about their endurance. What's the typical diet for an Aborigine? Do you know?
I think lots of
Vegetarian or
berries.
meat?
Yeah. They're not vegetarian, I don't think. They do hunt, and you know, they do, I think, use lots of wild, you know, fruits and vegetables as well, but they do, I don't think they are vegetarian. And someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they do hunt, and yeah.
So they still live in the wild now, right? Apart from civilization? Or am I wrong?
Not everyone. I think it's not the majority. I think still in the wild could be the minority, but again, I don't know enough to say that, but it's probably the minority.
Yeah.
Yeah. But overall, yeah, when we listen to you, it does make a lot of sense that the constant exposure, and even Walter White talks about the adaptation is not a proof of evolution. Here they are talking about evolution, but that could be more the adaptation, and how much time they spent in the sun, and eventually walking, you know, with not much clothing on, that can contribute to it as well.
Yeah.
So
I think
yeah.
I heard his presentation on that years ago. If it wasn't him, it was someone. I heard something like that. So yeah.
Yeah. So no problem. Well, we want to thank you so much for your time, Brother John, and we know that you had another presentation before, so it's really good to take advantage of the time that you can share with us.
Yes. Thank you
Yeah,
for the opportunity.
we are definitely looking forward to next time, which will be Eden Part 1. Is that right?
Yes, Eden Part 1. Yeah, that's becoming one of my favorite series. 3 and 4 especially, because it's cancer and it's from a different perspective altogether.
Yeah, definitely. And just want to remind everyone as well, if you don't find this presentation for some reason on YouTube after a while, it will be on Rumble, because those things have happened in the past. And yeah, we are looking forward to next time. Brother John, we would ask you to again pray for us and close with a word of prayer, please.
Okay. Lord Father, what an interesting conversation we've having here, sir. We see all of your people turning to you and finding ways to live healthfully in these end times. And we see that you're directing this. Your people are coming to you as you point them to you, sir. We thank you for that. We ask that you continue to do that, and the Spirit of God continue with us, sir. Thank you so much. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, and see you next week.
Okay. All right. Next week it is. Thank you all.
Okay. Bye. Okay, just want to remind everyone again, our next presentation is next Sunday, 10 a.m. for us, Australian Eastern Standard Time. And it is Eden Part 1. We encourage everyone to join us because so far it's been incredible, wonderful information that we have gathered from Brother John and his research and experience in the field. So thank you again. Remember, we are happy to answer questions if you have them even after those presentations. Email us at takechargeofyourhealth101@gmail.com, and either we will forward your questions to our speakers or we will answer them. And if you want to be part of our online community, join our YouTube or Rumble pages. They are usually listed under the description, in the description box under our presentations. And email us requesting to be in the mailing list as well. So thank you very much again for joining. May God bless you, and we are looking forward to seeing you next time. Bye now.